Retirement Tips Radio is brought to you by Business RadioX, the voice of business in your community. Currently serving over 25 markets, the Business RadioX network is growing fast. We're teaming up with retired execs and established entrepreneurs to support and celebrate local business leaders. If you'd like to make additional income while making a difference, discover more at brxteam.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Retirement Tips Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us Karsten Jeske, and he is with Early Retirement Now. Welcome, Karsten.
Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get too far into things, tell us about what you're up to. How are you serving folks?
I'm a blogger, and I retired 2 years ago from a busy corporate career. And so even before retiring, I already had my blog. And so that was just mostly chronicling my path to early retirement. And so now that I'm retired, I keep blogging and writing about how to achieve early retirement, how to live in early retirement, how to do the financial planning around retirement and early retirement, how to make sure you don't run out of money over the next 30, 40 or 50 or even 60 years. And so that's why I still write on my blog. It's called earlyretirementnow.com.
Now, what does early retirement mean? I would think that in today's world where a lot of people are working from home, they might be working, but they are kind of living on their own terms with their flexible lifestyle at their house. Has the definition of retirement changed?
Yeah, for us, I mean, it's not like we are doing the traditional retirement, live in Florida and play bingo or play golf the whole day. So for us, early retirement means, we have a school-age daughter, so she keeps us busy. I have a blog. I do a little bit of financial consulting on the side. I make a little bit of money on the side with the blog. So it's not my parents' or grandparents' traditional retirement. That's for sure.
Right. So it isn't like back in the day, you would work somewhere for a long time, and then at a certain age, everybody just called it a day. You might got a pension from that company. You might have your own investments, and you're close to Social Security, so that's going to kick in. That was what I guess maybe another generation or a generation ago pictured in their head what retirement is. But in today's world, with this financial independence, retire early kind of movement that started, people look at this differently, right? Just their whole mindset has shifted around what it is. Like, is working part of retirement? It seems to be in a lot of cases that, you're working on a blog, so that's kind of work in some regards. Some people would think that that's not work, but I mean, I'm sure it feels like work in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it sometimes feels like work, You have, obviously, if I don't want to publish anything for 3 weeks, I don't have to, right? But I mean, you still feel a little bit compelled. It still feels like you have some deadlines. You have every day you get emails. People comment on your blog posts, and you feel compelled to reply. In some way, it's even worse than some work in the corporate world where you have defined hours and you have weekends where you don't work. It almost seems like a blog or any kind of other side business that people do when they retire early. It's more unpredictable work, and so you almost have to be on your best behavior all the time. Whereas with the corporate job, you have more defined work hours. So yeah, it's very different from traditional retirement, obviously.
So now, in your definition of retirement, is it like more kind of living on your own terms with your own rules?
Right. And again, so I set up my retirement planning. Obviously, I mean, if my blog went away tomorrow, I wouldn't have to starve or anything, right? So, I mean, I planned my early retirement that we have enough passive income from dividends and interest and capital gains that I never have to work again and I never have to blog again. So for me, the blogging is mostly to stay mentally sharp and stay engaged. And also, you get to meet a lot of people, right? So especially before the whole pandemic, right? This is a very active community. You locally, you meet a lot of people. You go to conferences. You go to smaller events where bloggers meet or other like-minded people meet to talk about the early retirement planning. That has come a little bit to a standstill now. But I'm sure that's going to pick up again. So again, I mean, for me, it's a hobby. I make a little bit of extra income on the side, and it just keeps you mentally sharp and engaged socially too.
Now, is that one of the challenges of being retired? Is this kind of, you got to do something every day, right? Like you got to fill 24 hours every day, and you might as well do something you like and something that's adding meaning to your life. I mean, there's only, I would imagine, I'm not retired yet, but there's only so much golf you can play or only so much fishing you can do. I mean, at some point that sounds like a good idea, maybe when you're dreaming about it, but when you're actually living it, it may not be as attractive every single day.
Yeah. And so you have to find hobbies that keep you engaged. I mean, so I always push back when people say, well, in order to retire early, you almost have to have an early retirement block, which is not everybody who retires early can have a retirement blog, right? Because we would have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of blogs. So I know plenty of people who are completely retired and they don't do the blogging thing, but they do something else, right? So they have some other passion projects. A lot of them, I mean, for a lot of them, their kids are their passion project, right? They do a lot of volunteering in school. It obviously helped in the spring, right? Schools shut down. They had to basically do homeschooling. So that kept us on a pretty good schedule every day, certainly every weekday. So everybody has their own little niche of how they are happy in retirement and in early retirement.
So when you were going about the planning process, at some point in your working life, you were like, you know what, I think I'm going to retire early, right? Like, so that was kind of a mental shift for you to say, okay, I'm going to aim at this point or this time or this age to retire. Right. And then has what you imagine retirement being, is it what it is?
Yeah, for the most part it is. I always say that it's not like there was this bliss and great increase of happiness the day I retired, right? It's what I expected, and it's not like my entire work life was miserable and then I have this bliss and happiness suddenly in retirement. I think my entire life was pretty happy. I had a very rewarding job, rewarding in every sense. I worked in finance for almost my entire life. And so I always found that very interesting. And so in that sense, the retirement is as expected. So we moved away from a very high cost of living area to still a relatively high cost living area, but it's much lower cost than where we used to live. We live in Washington State, not in Seattle, but just out of Portland. And I was really looking forward to more of a suburban, quieter, more relaxed life. We used to live in a very small apartment in San Francisco, and now we have a single family house out in the suburbs here. So, I mean, that's what I was really looking forward to that. And we are very happy here. And so it really has worked out the way we imagined.
So now let's talk about some advice for folks out there that are contemplating doing this. Did you have a number in mind? Like, I've heard different kind of schools of thought regarding, okay, I have to have whatever, $2 million. I saw an article the other day, the guy said $8 million. I've seen all kinds of numbers of what you aim at. And then when you have that, then you can kind of flip the switch. But then I've heard also other things of, your cash flow is what matters, your monthly cash flow and what kind of lifestyle you lead. That's really the thing to worry about. So do you have an opinion about that?
Oh, yeah. So basically, it depends on what kind of a retirement budget you're aiming for, right? So the rule of thumb is, so imagine you have no other income, and also no other future income, right? Because I'm still going to have a small pension that starts in about 10 years. I'm going to have Social Security, which I probably want to push out all the way until age 70 to max out that spousal. There's a little bit of an arbitrage you can do there. But so imagine you had never any additional income and never additional cash flows like Social Security, and you want to withdraw, say, $100,000 every year and adjust that for inflation. So there is a rule of thumb, and the rule of thumb is called the 4% rule. And the 4% rule says that if you have a relatively balanced, diversified portfolio, say anywhere between 60% and 75% stocks and the rest long-term bonds, then you can withdraw about 4% of that portfolio in the first year and then do the adjustments according to inflation every year. And that should last for 30 years, probably even a little bit longer than 30 years, basically until the traditional retiree dies. And maybe if you do it a little bit more cautiously and say you withdraw only maybe 3.5% or 3.3, 3.4, 3.5% of your initial net worth, that should last, then your money should last maybe even 50 to 60 years. So I did some back tests and simulations, and I think if you had retired right at the peak, right before the Great Depression, right before the big stock market bust in 1929, yeah, I mean, if you take down your withdrawal rate all the way to maybe into the low 3%, you would have still lasted, your portfolio would have still lasted 50 years or 60 years and never run out of money. So if you look at what is your budget, how much do you need every month, every year, and you multiply that by 25, that would get you through a traditional retirement. And if you maybe multiply it by, let's make it a round number, you multiply that by 30, I mean, you will definitely never run out of money. So, and even in the worst possible case, you wouldn't run out of money. And actually in the best possible case, after that many decades, you will have potentially, I mean, in the best possible case, you have many times, you would have many times multiplied your initial net worth, and you can leave a pretty nice size bequest and use that for all your charity needs and give money to your loved ones when you pass away. So there are obviously some rules of thumb, and so my lesson that I learned from looking at a lot of these retirement safe withdrawal planning challenges is really a very it has to be a very personalized analysis. I retired at age 44, and I will have some additional income in the future. So I could actually, what I withdraw now, I will probably have to scale that down in the future, because first of all, Social Security will kick in at some point. Even if I give Social Security a haircut and say, well, there might be some political risk and I might get less than what I was promised. Even if I get half the Social Security, I can still reduce my withdrawals in the future. And if you take that into account, then you might even increase your withdrawals a little bit in the beginning. So, but yeah, I mean, there are a lot of good rules of thumbs, and then if you start looking more into the details, you will find that, I mean, there's some planning tools that you can use to decide how much you need, depending on how much you need in terms of one net worth number today in order to satisfy your cash flow needs over time.
Now, does the fact that the interest rates are so low nowadays, historically low, impact any of those rules of thumb? Because yes. At one point there was a time, where you can get a decent amount of money from interest, where that number is pretty difficult to achieve in today's market. But the stock market is going crazy. So has that balance shifted where it used to be like a 60-40, 70-30 split? Has that changed any?
Yeah, so very good point. So I think that is actually one of my main points on my blog that you can't just calculate a safe withdrawal rate without taking into account where you find yourself in life today, right? Where are interest rates and where are equity valuations? And I mean, if you look back through history, and by the way, it's not just the nominal interest rate, right? It's also the inflation environment, because interest rates had been low before. So, interest rates were really high during the 70s, but you also had a lot of inflation during the 1970s. So what I found is that the determinants, if you look at the determinants, what do you want to use as your safe withdrawal rate? It's actually equity valuations are the biggest determinant, and not so much the bond interest rate. Of course, if you have a 100% bond portfolio, yes, then absolutely you should look at exclusively what are your bond interest rates. But most investors take on a little bit more risk, and they have some equities in their portfolio. And if you have something like 60 to 70 or 75% equities in your portfolio, you look at the volatility of that portfolio. 90 or 95% of the volatility of that portfolio comes from equity volatility. And absolutely. If you look at so actually equity valuations, that is the main determinant of how much money you should withdraw. And if you find yourself at a multi-year peak again in the stock market, then absolutely you have to be a little bit more cautious about your safe withdrawal rate. And then on the other hand, if you had retired at the bottom of the bear market, say in 2002 or 3 or in 2009. You would be crazy to withdraw only 4% from a diversified portfolio. You probably have to jack that up to 5% or 6%. So yes, absolutely. So your withdrawal rate should depend on not just your idiosyncratic parameters, but also market valuation, and especially stock market valuation. If you have a portfolio that's mostly in stocks.
Now, once you're like saying, okay, now today's the day, yesterday I was working and today I'm retired. And I know, okay, say hypothetically, I'm going to pull out $100,000 a year. So I would assume that my big pile of money, my nest egg, I'm reinvesting at those rates. Am I still taking some of my $100,000 that I've allocated to live on and investing that as well? Or I'm just kind of reinvesting dividends and reinvesting things on my portfolio?
So, I mean, if you take out $100,000 and you consume $60,000 and you reinvest $40,000 in something else, you should not consider that a $100,000 withdrawal, right? You should look at the net numbers. You should consider that a $60,000 net withdrawal. And so, in fact, and if that's the case, you should probably only withdraw the $60,000 and keep the $40,000 in place and not touch them because of tax considerations. You don't want to create unnecessary capital gains on your tax return. But I mean, some people obviously face this problem because of required minimum distributions, right? So they might have to withdraw more because of the RMDs. More than they need to live on, and then in that case, you would reinvest your excess distributions. But that's I think that's relatively rare, and especially for early retirees, you don't have to worry about required minimum distributions. I think that now starts at age 72. So yeah, I mean. For 99% of the people, what you should do is you should really look only at what is your net retirement budget and how much do you need to live on, and that should be exactly what you withdraw.
And then is your kind of the portfolio, do you adjust your risk based on your age as you're getting, is it kind of like rocket ship in stages where you're like, okay, you're in the mid 40s now, so from mid 40s to mid 50s, I'm going to have this kind of aggressive of a portfolio, and then maybe as I get older, I'm going to kind of taper off some of that risk?
I mean, there are different schools of thought, right? I mean, there's the whole idea of, I mean, there's some guidance obviously out there. I mean, you look at what target date funds do, right? They have some sort of asset allocation depending on where you are relative to your retirement date, not so much your age, but your retirement date. And so what they do is, during the last few years of your working career, they definitely take down the equity allocation quite substantially because and this takes off a little bit of the risk right around your retirement date. You don't want to have, certainly you don't want to have 100% equities right at your retirement date, right? Because if you're one of these unlucky cohorts in history, say people who retired in 1929 or in the 60s or early 70s or 2000 or 2007, if you had 100% equities right around that time, you might have so much of a drop in your portfolio, and then you start taking the withdrawals, that even with the eventual bull market again, you depleted your portfolio so badly that you will never recover from that. So that's so there's this concept is called sequence of return risk, that the risk is that you have very poor returns right at the beginning of your retirement from which you will never recover. So there are some rules of thumb that say, yes, right around your retirement date, you probably don't want to be that equity heavy anymore. And I normally recommend something like 60 to 75% equities. And the funny thing is, I mean, because you mentioned bond returns are so low, because people get really nervous about very expensive equities. We're now at all-time highs again, or close to the all-time highs, depending on what index you look at. But as actually bonds seem to be really, really overvalued because the yields are so low. And so it's really a two-edged sword. Yes, I mean you want to have a little bit less equities because equities are so expensive. But I mean, look, what's the alternative, right? There's this acronym TINA, TINA. There is no alternative. So you almost, because all asset classes are really so expensive, and yields are so low. Earnings yield in equities and dividend yields are relatively low. Bond yields are so low. You almost have to shift a little bit more into equities just to get the expected return that you need to get you through the next 30, 40, or 50 years. So the ironic recommendation, because of this extremely high valuation of all of the different asset classes, is it's intriguingly, you want to increase your equity valuation, right? Because if you had bond interest rates at 10% and equities with 4, 5, 6% dividend yield, then you could even afford to have more bonds, right? So now everything is so expensive, you almost can't afford to have a lot of bond diversification because the yields are so low. So it's a real conundrum that what should retirees do right now? So in fact, it has turned out that, say, everybody who retired anytime between 2015 to 2018 or even 2020, they have actually done relatively well with more than 60% equities. Just because of that reason, bond yields are so low. You have to put your money somewhere. You have to get your expected return. You have to pump up that expected return to get through so many decades. You put more money in stocks, and it has worked out relatively well over the last 5 years. So we'll see how it works out over the next 10 years.
And these are some of the topics and conversations you're dealing with on your blog on a regular basis, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And if somebody wanted to check out the blog and maybe get on your subscriber list, what's the website again?
earlyretirementnow.com. It's just one long word. And there's a link to subscribe. You can look through my list of all posts that I've ever written. So my little claim to fame in the blogging community is that I have written a series about exactly some of the things that we talked about, the challenges of withdrawing money and doing it in a way that you don't run out of money. and it's called the Safe Withdrawal Rate series. And there's a link at the top of the blog at the main menu. And this is I think half of the traffic to my blog just is for that series.
Wow, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Well, Karsten, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work in helping so many people.
Thank you so much.
And that website, one more time, is earlyretirementnow.com. Karsten, thank you again for sharing your story.
Thanks.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Retirement Tips Radio.
Retirement Tips Radio is brought to you by Business RadioX, the voice of business in your community. Currently serving over 25 markets, the Business RadioX network is growing fast. We're teaming up with retired execs and established entrepreneurs to support and celebrate local business leaders. If you'd like to make additional income while making a difference, discover more at brxteam.com.